Dark Souls, the game that defined a decade and then some. For a good while, everything was Dark Souls. Crash was Dark Souls, Link was Dark Souls, Monster Hunter was Dark Souls, My Family Tree is Dark Souls, your YouTube feed is Dark Souls, and even now, I am Dark Souls. How, why, and where so much Dark Souls? The only way to get to the bottom of this is obvious. No, we must play Dark Souls. Already on the title screen, you are experiencing Dark Souls. You are first forced to wait through 1 minute of unskippable pop-ups. Then, your controller doesn't respond, and the resolution is off. Also, the frame rate is locked at 30. You decide to alt-tab because of the controller issue, and then boom, the game hard freezes your entire PC with a white screen. Hello? After resetting your PC, your controller is finally working, except all the inputs are Xbox inputs, and your mouse is still on the screen. This must be the challenging gameplay they were speaking of. The trick to this boss fight is installing DS Fix or purchasing the remaster. Now with the first challenge completed, you move on to the second challenge, the character creator. Already, the screen is filled with traps and bizarre placements. Half of the classes are terrible, but you wouldn't know that unless you fell for the trap. The only starting item is the master key or the pendant, but you wouldn't know that either. Then, even if you manage to avoid all those traps, you enter the character editor and realize, oh my god, this character creator is terrible. Now you might think that was the last trap, but you'd be wrong, because there's still 2 left. The other trap is this character isn't the way you're going to be looking for most of the game. And so this then must be Dark Souls. An old PC port of an Xbox 360 title in an age when Steam had much more primitive interfaces and features. The game begins and your bum ass is languishing around in a prison until a cool looking man breaks you out. And after deciding that, hey, I've got absolutely nothing better to do, you go off on what seems to be, as of right now, a pointless quest. A few ways after, you encounter your first real enemy, an enemy that, after a traumatizing amount of demon rump screen time, finally falls and awards you with a great hammer. A great hammer you cannot use and does absolutely no damage. The game also gives you your weaponry and equipment that you were meant to start off with now. Now being after you have fended off that bootylicious babysitter. You then proceed to clear out the whole area easily because nothing here is even as remotely difficult as that boss was. And honestly, I would have kept playing, but I already know what's in store for me with these frivolous rage games like Cat Mario, Flappy Bird, whatever those kids play these days. And so this then must be Dark Souls, a terribly designed game focused on using cheap gimmicks and patience testing in order to aggravate the player.
This is your fate.
The game begins, and you appear to be a zombified person locked away in some jail cell. Then suddenly this really cool knight comes out of nowhere and saves you by handing over the keys to the cell. Well, feeling obligated to thank the man, you go off on what is currently a pretty pointless quest. A few ways later, you encounter this huge demon that jumped out from the roof, and after realizing that fighting him is not the best play, you decide to look around for a way out. Then, there it is. Lit up by torches that stick out from the dark grey surroundings is the escape route, which is where you'll find your starting class's equipment. After exiting the tunnel system, you are met with what seems to be the courtyard from earlier. Noticing this, you go down the stairs and are greeted with a shortcut. And while you could fight the demon now, you could instead look around for maybe more ways of becoming stronger. After walking up the stairs, you might have a very physical encounter with a boulder. An encounter which will most likely lead you to smash the man who rolled its face in. Walking forward, you'll notice the door is locked, but luckily on the way back, you'll also notice that that boulder had a very much physical encounter with the wall as well. And after checking out the inside, you find the man who saved you earlier, though he appears to be heavily injured. Here he tells you his name, Oscar, and explains why he even bothered saving you in the first place. Apparently, there's this ancient tale of a chosen undead, an undead that after ringing the first bell of awakening will come to know his true purpose. He laments failing to realize this quest himself, but hopes that perhaps you could be the one instead. He then hands you the keys to the exit as well as an Estus flask and sees you on your way. His last warning being to not worry about him, since, much like you, he is a hollow, and as a hollow, with death can come insanity. And he fears that after going hollow, he might start assaulting you. Now, with the keys to the exit and an Estus flask in tow, you go about leaving the area, the only thing stopping you being the asylum demon from earlier, which, with a much more even battle, is finally vanquished, allowing you to finally leave the undead asylum and truly begin your journey in Lordran, your only guide being the undead fable Oscar spoke of. And so this then must be Dark Souls, a game with one of the best tutorial areas ever created, where it teaches that although you will inevitably have to deal with tough enemies, it is important to pay attention and think of ways of making your life easier, whether that's through exploration or out-of-the-box solutions. It teaches you to be ready to deal with dangerous areas, tough boss fights, and tragic characters. It teaches you to be prepared to die in its uninviting world.
To the land of the ancient lords. Lordran.
Hey, Bird, I think we're here. Slow down now. Slow down. You can slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Asshole. Good lord, where have I ended up now? Of course, upon reaching the first area, these ideas are instantly reinforced. First guy you talk with calls you a fool and lays out the path you're supposed to take, before again restating your lame ass probably won't even get halfway done. Turns out all you gotta do is ring 2 bells, simple as. Now, how, when, and where you go about doing this, that's all on you. And here's where Dark Souls changes an awful lot depending on the person. It could be a game where you never really had to suffer the pain of going through the areas blind thanks to having a nifty guide around, and now because of this you are beginning to enjoy your time in this bizarre land. It could also be a game that, despite how much praise you've heard of it for its storytelling, atmosphere, and gameplay, seems to be lacking in all of said departments and feels more like a prolonged form of cock and ball torture. It may even be a game where, due to your tendencies to play games like a complete maniac, has led you to be a naked raisin man running around with every single stat point put into strength, wielding a Black Knight ultra grade sword the size of you. Of course, if you were to be this person, then you would inevitably go and do whatever you please, such as fighting bosses earlier than usual, and maybe even going so far as to enter the Tomb of Giants before Blighttown, because of one bad experience with toxic darts. If you were this person, then now you've gotten yourself stuck in the bottom of a skeleton-infested chasm, with no way of getting out other than just crawling back out of the hellhole. If by chance you are this player, then you would most likely drop the game for a year or two because you can't even fathom a way of escaping the Tomb of Giants this early. These are all hypotheticals, mind you. I'm just bringing them up to say that Dark Souls is a game that can be experienced in a million different ways. Though, no matter which way you go about playing, there are a couple things that will universally stand out. For one, bonfires are pretty nice. Rest at one and you now have a semi-permanent checkpoint where you can level up and refresh your Estus, but most importantly, you can just sit back, relax, and take a break. Which in a world as stressful as this one is a welcome change of pace. Only drawback to these things is that all enemies respawn once you rest at them, but thanks to this brand new invention, you never have to worry about running out of any resources. Quite simply put, the Estus Flask is the item that allows Dark Souls to be as Dark Souls as it wants to be. The drink is bottomless until you reach the bottom, but luckily the refills are bottomless. Not once do you ever have to go out grinding just to get more healing items, you just simply can chug along as is thanks to your trusty Estus, which is seemingly always just enough to get you to your next bonfire and or shortcut. Oh yeah, that's right. This game's map is interconnected in many ways and relies heavily on shortcuts that are supposed to make you go, oh my god, this is where I was? It's kinda amazing really. I don't know how the developers managed to make the entire world connect like this and have all the locations make sense with one another, but damn is it impressive. Honestly, the only thing that disappoints so far are the boss fights. They all have been, up to this point, scary, annoying, or relieving. Bosses like Taurus Demon and Gargoyles are pretty stressful, which is a good thing. Bosses like Capra Demon are mistakes, which depending on who you ask might also be a good thing. And bosses like Quelaag are relieving, because a boss fight usually means the end of an area, and if that area was, say, Blighttown, then holy shit am I happy to be fighting a boss. You know, I played the game with the mindset of exploring everything and doing everything. The climb down from Blighttown is the only time where I decided, Dude. Nah, I'm good. Luckily, the way up is much quicker, which is nice because after ringing the second bell of awakening, you have to run all the way back to Sen's Fortress, which is all the way back in the first area pretty much. And so, with Dark Souls' first act coming to a close, one thing is made abundantly clear. Dark Souls is a game that built upon and refined the foundation laid out by its predecessor Demon's Souls. Pretty much everything wrong with that game is fixed and or improved in this one. Dark Souls is the game that defined what it meant to be a Souls game. As you sprint out of Blighttown and return to Firelink, you might begin to feel that things are finally starting to look up. That place was about as terrible as it can be, right? And at this point, a lot of the shortcuts are open, so traversing the land is becoming very easy. As you make your way to Sen's Fortress, it's possible that you finally think you got the hang of this game, which is where it reveals its next trump card. As you walk into Sen's Fortress, you're immediately greeted with a pressure plate trap and a barrage of arrows. Uh-oh. And so now you realize that Dark Souls is in actuality a game where it only ever gets worse. Sen's Fortress is a pretty terrible place. You will most likely die many times, and you may even begin to question your journey. The story of this no-fun zone is that it was at some point used as a training grounds for knights, though now it has become more of a proving grounds to see whether someone is worthy of entering Anor Londo or not. So around your third or fourth death, it might begin to dawn on you a bit what it actually means to be undead. Being immortal, you could realistically attempt overcoming this place for an eternity, but death not being the end doesn't make dying any less painful. Death can be pretty aggravating, mind-numbing even. You might die so many times you forget the reason you came here in the first place. You might die so many times you decide to give up entirely. When you are immortal and undead, the only thing that could really stop you is yourself, because the burden of living and struggling has driven you to become hollow. To be fully hollow then means to have completely given up. And as a man farther into the fortress states, many undead have come here and become hollow. Wait a second, why are there multiple undead coming if there's only one chosen one? Whatever, you did it, they failed. Meaning, you must be the chosen undead, and your reward for succeeding is a gorgeous area, filled with tough enemies and dangerous trapezing.
Oh, this part.
Not a single enemy in this place is goblin tier. There are silver knights. Oh! You heard the same noise he did. Demons and even gargoyles from an earlier boss fight. This place feels like a place from legend. Mythical almost. It really fits all the stories you might have heard of it coming up to here. The Firekeeper here even reaffirms the tale of the chosen undead and directs you to the princess's chambers, which are right across from the bonfire. As you go through Anor Londo and most likely die from extreme projectile-based tightroping, you will also come to another realization. Dark Souls is not a game where it just gets worse. Dark Souls is a game where the developers go into every new area with the intention of making this area the worst area. Your trip in Anor Londo comes only to an end after besting the toughest bosses yet, those being Ornstein and Smough. Your reward for accomplishing such a grand task being great chest ahead. A vista from that of a fairy tale. You quite literally fight through legions of powerful enemies for a princess locked away at the top of a castle. A princess that again reaffirms the tale of the chosen undead and explains that next you must vanquish the 4 lords of the realm. After which you must place their souls into this lord vessel in order to unlock the door leading to the kiln of the first flame, where you will do as Gwyn did many years ago and relink it once again. Reasoning? Well, I mean, come on, just look at her. She is the embodiment of the most warm and kind mother anybody could ask for. Roads have been tough, and she knows that, so she gives us with the ability to fast travel and says, "Woohoo! You go, champ. I believe in you."
Okay, Mama, I will go.
I will go kill God now.
Okay, Mama, I'll go kill.
Jack, what is the issue?
Okay, Mama, I'll go kill God right now.
Yeah, I guess you could just say no. But I mean, come on, look at how nice she's been. No one else has been this nice. How could you be so cruel? And so with this begins Dark Souls' final act, gathering the Lord Souls scattered throughout Lordran, and finally relinking the first flame. Until this point, Dark Souls has been semi-linear, but now it is completely open to you, and you can go and explore as you please. Even if you aren't all that strong at the beginning of this segment, by the end of it you will undoubtedly become extremely overpowered. This is due to how the segment is designed. Each and every one of these late game areas is difficult in their own way, and the bosses lying at the end of each of them are also pretty tough. So tough that you might just decide that you'll come back later after you've checked out some of the other bosses, which is when you'll find out, oh my god, they're all terrible in their own special way. Lost Izalith is a place filled to the brim with lava and demons, some of which you might be all too familiar with, and some of which you will soon wish you weren't. Does this look like any fun? Tomb of Giants is dark, really dark, blindingly so. If you don't have a skull lantern, then the place will be pretty much impossible to navigate, partly due to the extremely powerful giant skeleton enemies that fill its tunnels. Does this seem at all enjoyable? The Duke's Archives is just a bad time all around. You get to the guy just to find out he's invulnerable, and you get locked up in a prison with a bonfire you can't even warp from. Even if you manage to break out of the cell, the prison's filled with these freaky enemies. And even if you escape the prison, the halls are extremely confusing and hard to navigate. And even if you navigate them, you then have to navigate across invisible platforms over bottomless pits. I am perfectly fine. I am perfectly fine. I'm not annoyed? No. Does this sound like a good time? And last but not least, New Londo, the flooded ruins of a town that is now filled to the brim with ghosts who will follow you to the ends of the earth through walls and all. Whose boss you can't even face without having a special ring equipped.
What Elder's horrors await you?
Wait. Am I supposed to wear something? I forgot.
A ring you can only get by killing an extremely nice and cool looking dog. Could I perhaps have just been a closet masochist all along? The lords of these places aren't much better either. The four kings are... well, there's four of them. It's four kings. It's not a one-on-one battle. Nito, another boss fight, is not even remotely a one-on-one battle. The Bed of Chaos is a 1-on-9.81 meters per second squared battle. And Seath? Seath really isn't that bad. But this one time all the clans from outside his boss room followed me into the fight. Like, what's up with that? Also, he's the only one that can curse you, which is a fate much worse than death. So the odds are looking pretty stacked, right? But this is where the original thing the game taught you comes back into play. These four bosses are your new Asylum demons, and if they are to be seen this way, that means that all of Lordran is your new Undead Asylum. So you explore, and explore some more, and although you might not become all that more powerful, you will most definitely become much more capable. A capability that will help you deal with these new challenges. Except for the Bed of Chaos.
Also been killed by the Bed of Chaos 5 times, maybe 8 times. I can't tell anymore. The funniest part is, I'm gonna win this time and not die to the boss. Watch.
You know, maybe that first definition of Dark Souls wasn't that far off. Anywho, without further ado, you place all the Lord vessels and unlock the doors leading to Gwyn and the First Flame. Except, there is one last thing to be done. Being the Prepare to Die edition of the game means it comes bundled in with its DLC, a DLC that is far off the beaten path and pretty well hidden, though if you do manage to figure out how to get into it, what you will experience is something worth telling your friends about. The game's DLC takes place within Ulisio, which at this point is apparently 200 years before present day. How is that possible? Time's weird in Dark Souls. Anyways, you are tasked with saving Princess Dusk from the clutches of Manus, a prisoner turned monster residing deep below in the darkness that now threatens the town. You know, up until this point, I was still a bit confused on the whole Dark Souls bosses being amazing thing. I don't know, a lot of them just sort of been lame, no? Not many have been too difficult, and usually any difficulty just comes in the form of what feels to be annoying design. Ornstein and Smo were pretty cool. That's about it. Everybody has felt either too easy or too annoying. Luckily, upon facing Artorias and Manus, I have decided on retracting that statement. Artorias of the Abyss is one bamf of a bro. Everything about him just oozes cool. Most likely because he is heavily inspired by Guts the Black Swordsman. Aside though, the fight against him is really fun, and all the lore about this guy is really interesting. Apparently, he had come here to deal with the Abyss problem, which was a problem he clearly was not ready to deal with at the time. He also brought along his adorable wolf companion Sif to help him out, though sadly the two were nowhere near strong enough to deal with Manus. Which says a lot about how strong Manus is, because neither of these two guys are exactly pushovers. Yeah, Sif is really young at this point, but Artorias is extremely strong. Fun fact, he is actually left-handed. Another fun fact, his left arm is smashed to bits when you fight him, meaning he is physically held back during the battle, as well as mentally, as is shown by, well... And so with this and many other interesting points, it is clear to see that Dark Souls is actually the best Berserk fan game ever made. Berserk's influence is felt all over the place, but that's most likely due to the game taking place in a dark European fantasy setting. A setting that Berserk pretty much defined all on itself in Japan. Well then, Miyazaki just thinks Berserk is pretty cool. Back to the DLC, Manus and the area before him is extremely interesting. It's a place that feels flooded with darkness, like if it was somehow poured into this abyss by Manus himself. Here you will encounter large humanities as enemies and can save Best Dog, who will help you on the boss fight if need be. And believe me, that might need be. The Manus boss fight is the most exhilarating, intense, action-packed one-on-one I've had in a while. This boss made me go, "What the fuck?" on many occasions, and with each of those occasions I fell more and more in love with this boss fight. I mean, just look at that offbeat attack tempo, the roll spam punishing nature of it. Oh my god, he makes you block attacks in 3 dimensions. So yeah, now with this, it's clear to see that Dark Souls is actually a game that's best part is always in the DLC. A DLC which is usually experienced near the end of a full game. This is most likely due to having an entire finished project to look back on and work upon, helping greatly when it comes to improving. Plus, it's a lot easier to write stories in a world that's already existed for a bit. Dude, the thing is, if I put 1 point to vitality, look, I'll lose this beauty.
Oh my.
Oh. As Manus falls, there's only one other challenge left, and that's Calamite, which again is another really fun boss fight with a big old menacing entity, though in this case, it feels more like you're fighting against a force of nature more than any monster. Also, the only way to initiate this fight is with the help of a giant blind archer, who hasn't so much as moved in such a long time that his body sheds dust as he goes for his bow to strike down the dragon. A dragon flying kilometers away that he hits with pinpoint accuracy. God damn, that's cool. After some really satisfying tail cutting and some not so satisfying ear degradation, you have finally vanquished every challenge there is in this world. All that remains is to finally defeat Gwyn, the god of the sun. Before I went there though, I went to another place of interest, though it's one much less exciting. After a couple hidden walls and a long fall down a tree trunk, you reach Ash Lake. It's a strange area, situated far beneath any area in all of Lordran, yet despite that there seems to be light here, and a dark blue sky. A few ways down the shoreline you'll eventually stumble across a dragon, a small childlike dragon, which, just like the tales tell, is completely immortal. Here, at the bottom of what seems to be the entire world, where as far as the eye can see there is nothing more than just deep blue ocean and sky, is the last of dragonkind. A game that tells an intriguing story through subtext alone. Is that what Dark Souls was all along? Doesn't matter. I've got what I really came for now. You see, I didn't want to just beat Dark Souls. I wanted to ascend Dark Souls. I want to not just be able to defeat this so-called God Gwyn, I want to obliterate him. And there is no better way of doing that than ascending to God status. But what does that mean exactly in a video game? Well, God as we define him is the creator, right? So then a god of a game would be its creator. Meaning finally, I have become Miyazaki himself. And in this form, I shall consume the soul of Manus, granting me a fragment of Miyazaki's power. Since, after all, that clearly was the best boss in the game. In this state, I am all but invincible. The only thing that can hurt me now is gravity, because without kill planes, I would fall for an eternity. What the fuck? Now, with all this power, I shall siege Gwyn's kiln and finally figure out what Dark Souls really was about all along. With all this power, I shall step through the final fog door and face off against this game's final challenge. The challenge this extremely difficult journey has been leading up to the entire time. Finally, all... If you kill Guinevere in Anor Londo, it is revealed to you that she was nothing but an illusion. An illusion set up by a son Gwyn never knew he had, called Gwyndolin. The reason for this is because Guinevere has been wanting to leave to follow her heart for a while now, and thanks to Gwyndolin's powers, she can do exactly this without anybody knowing. Of course, this could only happen if Gwyn was out, which he was. He had been fighting a war against demons apparently, a war which ended with an accord for neither parties to get involved in each other's business anymore. A strange accord because that's exactly what demons have been wanting the entire time. After returning home, Gwyn would seek his daughter to check up on her one last time before embarking on linking the First Flame. He has decided to do this in an attempt to save his waning legacy, and hold on to whatever little power he has left in the world. Of course, knowing full well what relinking the First Flame will do to him, he demands his knights stay behind. A demand that, out of sheer loyalty, they would not follow, which explains the souls of knights walking from that strange space in between. In this new, or I guess real, Anor Londo, it is revealed that the crown city is almost completely deserted. Its gorgeous song long gone. It instead now rests with an eternal moon. If all of this was an illusion, then does that mean that the words of Guinevere were that of Gwyndolin? This is strange because for what reason would Gwyndolin have to lie to you? Is the fable of the chosen undead real? Up until now, the only people that have spoken about any undead voyage are the Way of the White and Gwyndolin himself, not counting the serpents because they work directly with him. The Way of the White's undead journey through Lordran has seemingly nothing to do with Anor Londo. They never even mention anything about a Lord vessel. They are simply in Lordran on pilgrimage. In fact, only one other character has brought up the undead fable, and that was Oscar. Some other people bring it up, yes, but they seem kind of disillusioned with it. For such a famous tale, how come no one seems to know about it? Even stranger, this undead fable is spoken of in extremely archaic words and almost corny levels of English, as if it was made to sound ancient. In this game, you do travel 200 years into the past, and even back then, people spoke completely normal. If the undead fable was a more recent lie, then it would suddenly explain a lot about its discrepancies. How come none of the gods seem to know about it? How come multiple undead are capable of doing it? How come Anor Londo was set up in this fairy tale-like illusion? Has the whole chosen undead thing just been a half-baked lie in order to trick somebody with enough willpower to fall in the shoes of Gwyn? A lord that was willing to sacrifice everything in an attempt to extend his own setting rule a while longer? Oscar then, despite risking losing his own life, had done it all for nothing more than what really was just a fairy tale. He's not the only case of tragedy striking characters either. In fact, not a single character you encounter on your entire journey gets any happy endings, minus those that don't even bother moving from one place. Laurentius of the Great Swamp, despite being extremely kind and compassionate with you, even going so far as to share his pyromancies.
When I gave you that flame, I gave you a part of myself. Please take good care of it.
Ends up going hollow himself after you tip him off to where to find more powerful pyromancies. Big Hat Logan, despite being known as antisocial, doesn't treat you at all badly, being completely willing to share his sorceries with you, and even if you can't learn sorceries, he instead cheers you on, saying that sorcery really isn't all there is out there.
I'm afraid that you are unable to learn sorcery. The basic framework, you see, it cannot be taught. Oh, do not fret. Life isn't all about sorcery. You will find your own way. Don't frown with regret. Peer forward, with your head high.
Ironic because after a while, Big Hat Logan goes hollow from delving too deep into his research. Rhea of Thorland is either killed by a member of her own religion or abducted and taken into Sea's archives, most likely to be used as another one of his attempts at bringing back to life his own lost race. I could easily go on forever, but I feel like you get the point by now. Nobody in Lordran gets a happy ending. It's a place filled with regrets, obsessions, madness, and corruption. Yet despite that, two characters did manage to break the mold. Seigmeyer is a special case because although his story also ends with tragedy, his character is interesting and says a lot about what the game is trying to say. When you first meet him, the man is asleep, waiting in front of Sun's fortress for it to open. That's it. No plan or anything, he's just waiting for it to go on and open for him. Which, after it does, he quite easily travels through the place until he encounters another obstacle. Yet despite this time coming up with a way of dealing with it, he decides it's too much work and he'd rather just wait for another miracle to happen. Which, once again, once that miracle does come true, he moves on with ease, before, again, getting stuck on another roadblock. This time around, insisting that the player join him in waiting for more people to come and help deal with the enemies outside the door, despite the reality being that Seigmeyer himself is more than capable of dealing with them. In fact, odds are he is stronger than the player at this point, but instead of just doing it himself, he talks himself out of it once again, acting surprised and almost jealous of the player when they return to tell him the good news that they've dealt with all the enemies outside. Next time you meet him, he is back at the base, asking if the player was also responsible for the whole Sen's Fortress fiasco, which, after finding out the truth, makes him thank the player for helping out so much. He then goes on to say that he found nothing worthwhile up above and plans on going down below now. He tells the player not to worry about him going to such a dangerous place, because after all,
no worries. Venturing is my life. I'm prepared for the worst.
Funnily enough, our master level adventurer is later found in Blighttown, stuck on the ridge of the swamp because he didn't think to bring any poison healing items down to the most poisonous place on Earth. Luckily, once again, the players are to help him, showing that once again they are much more prepared than he is. Then finally comes Seigmeyer's potential last encounter. He has gotten himself stuck in quite the predicament, one the player is now also stuck with. Yet instead of doing as he always does and just hoping a miracle will come by and save him, he finally decides to take matters into his own hands, but only after the player has shown up, almost as if the thought of being saved yet again is something he wants nothing to do with. And so he charges head on in an attempt to correct his past mistakes, though, just like how many other people that have suffered from being held back by themselves do, overcorrects, and has bitten off more than he can chew. If the player chooses not to help him here, he will always die. And if he dies here and sees the player, he realizes that once again, he wasn't the hero he's always said he was. And if he doesn't die here, then he'll have to go on knowing that he was once again saved by a real adventurer. There's many reasons why characters can go hollow in this world. One I said earlier was because they give up, but another one could be maybe because they lost their purpose. Seigmeyer is a man who again and again is given a chance to be the true hero he sees himself as. Yet despite being given the chance, he always talks himself out of it. The last time you see Seigmeyer, he is lying dead at the base of Ash Lake, after presumably being cut down countless times by his own daughter. The only reason his daughter has done this is because she had given him a promise that if he ever go hollow, she will come find him and put him to rest. And so she does, forcing his hollow self to be linked with the ash bonfire and continuously killing him until there's nothing left of the man he once was. His daughter is a bizarre case because despite being completely human and dying permanently if it come to her, she continues to explore throughout Lordran without any issues. In fact, it seems like his daughter is 4 times the adventurer he ever could be. It's possible that maybe she got this focused will from her mother, or maybe at some point Seigmeyer really was a hero. Either way, one thing is for sure about his daughter. While the person she inherited her will from is questionable, it's obvious the person she inherited her heart from. She weeps over the corpse of her father, a man who would always talk himself out of being the great hero he really was.
Oh, Father. Dear Father.
If this is who Seigmeyer was, then Solà is the opposite of him. You first meet Solà staring off at the sun, warmly greeting the player and explaining why he's here. Apparently, he's purposely gone and turned himself undead in order to help him better on his quest to find his very own son. Most people think he's mad because who would willingly put themselves through that, but he's fine with it because at least he's finally working towards his dreams. He tells the player a lot about how the world works and lets them know that if they ever see a summon sign to be sure to summon him for some good old jolly cooperation. You meet him once again later in Orlando, where he compliments the player on all the things they have accomplished. If you continue speaking with him, he'll even jokingly say that the player likes talking to him so much he might have just believed the player fancies him. Seriously, this guy's just a bundle of joy. After this encounter, you will find him twice at the Sunlight Altar. At first, it's to ask if you wish to join his covenant with the sun and fight for what's good, only if you wish, of course. And if you do agree, he says that he couldn't be happier to finally have a brother in arms, especially one as brave as the player. Though not all is going great for Solà. At that same moment, if you speak with him later, he'll lament still not being able to find his own son, not in Orlando nor in Blighttown. At this point, he begins fearing that maybe he had given up everything in pursuit of a dream he will never be able to fulfill. A sentiment that he appears to be completely lost in once you meet him later in Lost Isolith, which is where his tale can end in one of 2 ways. Either he technically finds his son, albeit a fake one, or Hidetaka Miyazaki was a child born in 1974, and even from a young age he was always lacking any dreams or desires. Back then, his hobbies were pretty much just reading, and despite being from a poor upbringing, he was always able to indulge this hobby thanks to visiting the local library very often. As he grew up, he became fascinated with games, but his parents wouldn't allow him to play any until he was already in university. Till then, he pretty much just played D&D and other tabletop games with friends. After graduating from university with a degree in social science, he contemplated on what to do. Becoming a game designer did cross his mind, but it sort of sounded insane to him, so he instead took up a cushy office job inside of a corporation called Oracle in order to help pay his sister's school bills. He worked this job well into his late 20s, with pretty much no issue. After all, he never really had any goals in life, or had any dreams he wanted to make come true. At least that was until one day he randomly met up with an old college friend, and his friend would ask him to play this cool game called Eco. After playing which had sparked something inside Miyazaki's brain. Suddenly he began dreaming and fantasizing of the worlds he could make, something he hasn't really done since he was young reading books in the library. It's a wonderful idea, making a game, yes, but there's one small problem. At this point, he is a 29-year-old man working an already well-paying job with no prior work experience in the game development field. Not many game companies would ever want to hire a man like that, except for one name from software. After hearing that they would be willing to hire him, Miyazaki quickly put in his notice and would leave his job shortly after. A move most would call insane. After all, what type of person would willingly sacrifice all they've built up in the pursuit of a dream? Only a madman would be willing to take up such an extreme cut to their own pay and livelihood to do something that will most likely be much more difficult than what he has already been doing. Now as a coder, Miyazaki would slowly work his way up the company's ladder, getting good favor with the higher-ups for being a great person to work with and an extremely hard-working, driven man. This favor is a reason that once he came asking if he could pick up a project called Demon Souls, they allowed it. A project that up until this point had been plagued with issues and was surely never going to see the light of day. Finally, seeing his chance to make his dream come true, Miyazaki took it, only to be met with a strange reaction. Finally, he had made what possibly could have been his dream, except it isn't really all there. There are those who praise it, yes, and he could go on pretending that he had finally done it and made the game he wanted, but instead, he decided to have another go at it, where he would inevitably create. The other ending of Solà is one where he doesn't succumb to his blind madness and copes with the lies the world feeds him. In this ending, Solà instead joins the player on the final quest to brave whatever lies beyond, the final fog wall. Solà is willing to see his ambition to the end, no matter what happens. What of the player then? Apparently there is no chosen undead. The legacy you've been trying to reignite is a legacy that's been setting for a long time now. All of your actions up until this point were done believing that you had to do them because you were some special undead.
It starts off at first nice and simple, right? You learn to walk by yourself. You learn to speak with those like yourself. You get to your ABCs, yada yada. But then at some point you'll have to start deciphering whether ICUP or any other prank kids your age are coming up means anything. Then boom, next thing you know it's your job to be fighting in some war, saving lives, solving some primordial force in nature. And the worst part is these things are now your problem because you were told that you are that special somebody that can do anything. Funny, because that's the same thing they told everybody else.
Does knowing you aren't special make the deeds you do any less worthwhile? If you knew you weren't special from the very beginning, would you have ever bothered trying to live up to your name at all? If you didn't have any footsteps to follow in, then whose would you have followed?
Everybody and everyone, they've all told them exactly what to do. Despite the truth being, the dream isn't fit for all or even achievable by that many. So of course I find it surprising that some people have the gall to call those who tried fools. As if what they were doing was irrational, like it didn't make any sense. As if somebody had bothered telling them it was all a lie. Well, it turns out
difficulty and purpose are completely relative things. There are those who are born as heirs to gods. There are those who acquire the strength through struggle. And there will be those who wish they could have accomplished the things they have always been able to accomplish. Always looking with jealousy at those who once were just like them.
You know, throughout history there have been these people that succeed and these people who fail. No in-betweens, really. Either you'll be remembered by all or just get forgotten like the rest of us. So going along those lines, what exactly would you have called Miyazaki if he failed then? What if Demon Souls never got popular? What if he got to try again with Dark Souls and once again the same thing happened? Yeah, the words of other people can hurt, but they'll never hurt as much as the words you throw at yourself. People can call you an idiot all they like, but it won't change the fact that at least you know, deep down, what you're striving towards. Which is why I don't find it all that surprising that when someone does inevitably give up, they are left like a husk of their former self. Left to suffer till the end of their time knowing they were never able to accomplish it. Burnt out corpses going on living because it's all that's left for them to do. It can be an unforgiving, lonely road where it seems like nothing ever goes your way. That's the reason why I find it so amazing that people, through sheer willpower, can continue working towards something that could only make sense to themselves, no matter how impossibly difficult the task, no matter how unlikely the odds. That's why I think it's inspiring that, no matter what lies beyond that fog gate, the things you have accomplished, in what little time you've been given, are great. Whether or not you plan on linking the fire, whether or not you figured out that you were never special to begin with, whether or not you ever heard the tale of Solà, a man who gave up what he had just to pursue a shallow dream. You fought,
and overcame any hardship that was in your way. Because as it turns out, all you needed was a little bit of a push, just a guide at least, to set you on the right path. A path that you tread no matter what came your way. Dark Souls is a game that teaches that even if
actively trying to get better and have a positive outlook on life was a real struggle for me, and I still struggle with it every day. But the important thing to remember is that,
oh man, if something like that can exist in this world, like, this is a world I want to live in, which it took a virtual thing to make me appreciate my real life a lot more and be inspired and whatever. But this random, or seemingly random to me, fantasy game that my brother just kept telling me to play ended up being like
kind of attention trap for me. It's hard to sit there worrying about the state of the world when there's a boss the size of a house running at you. It's hard to feel distracted or have the desire to look at your phone when you're working through a game environment that is so actively hostile. Because of all this, I think it quiets the part of my brain that is usually filling my thoughts with worries.
My mind is trying to push me down and defeat me, so to speak, and I'm not just going to give up. I have to fight back and win. I have to get that prey slaughtered screen in real life, but metaphorically. And that's what I did.
I just took the lessons to heart. So yeah, the video's gone on long enough. I'm not gonna extend any further by mouthing off a piece of my random no-name tale. The points I wanted to make were made, the stories I wanted to tell were told, and the things I wanted to say, I said. I guess all that's left to do now is just define the game.
So as another YouTuber I'm sure most of you are familiar with would say, thank you, Dark Souls.
As you pass through the fog wall, what lies on the other end is not Gwyn, god of sunlight, but instead Gwyn, the lord of cinder, a hollowed out husk of his former self, a king who fought hard to try and preserve what little power he had left in the world. Though, despite him clearly failing at accomplishing his goal, you feel as if you can't really blame the man for at least trying. And so with this, I think it's clear to see what Dark Souls was. A game with a boss fight at the end of it. A boss fight which means a lot to some people, inside of a game that at some point had and or has a lot of meaning to some people.
Life is brilliant, beautiful. It enchants us to the point of obsession. Some are true to their purpose, though they are but shadows, flesh and mind. One man lost his own body, but lingered on as a head. Others chase the charms of love, however elusive. What is it that drives you? Once, the Lord of Light banished dark and all that stemmed from humanity, and men assumed a fleeting form. These are the roots of our world. Men are props in stage of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will remain a lie. Young Hollow, knowing this, do you still desire peace? Very few indeed have come even this far, and yet your journey is far from over. Outgrown Hollow, have you what it takes? Truly? Young Hollow, conqueror of fear. What drives you so to overcome this supposed curse?